Well, I'm so grateful for your presence today. Let me do a little bit of introducing, and I'm going to start over here. Kari Davis, been a disciple here at Prince of Peace for, was it 107 years?
Yeah, about that. Yes.
About 25 years. Tirzah Lewis, a new friend of mine. We met through a mutual friend in the world of coaching. So grateful that you've joined us. And then Nicole and Martell Dennis, who have been disciples here for about 9 years with your kiddos. So again, thank you so much for being with us. My first question is this: how have you experienced the deaths of people like Ahmaud Arbery and certainly George Floyd and so many others in the past couple of months? What's that experience been like? And we'll just start here and go around.
Well, for me, I am tired. I'm exhausted. I'm angry. I'm sad. Being a black mom, grandmother, aunt, great aunt, I don't know if everybody understands having to wake up every day afraid for your loved ones. My son is married to my daughter-in-law who is white, and their two sons, my grandsons, are a beautiful mixture of the two of them. And she tries to protect them in that bubble, but because I've been doing this type of work and working in communities a very long time, that bubble is not exactly the type of thing that's going to protect them from the outside. And the platitudes and I'm sorry and, we're with you, I gotta tell you, I'm sick of it. I am sick of it. There needs to be systemic change. There is institutional racism, and it's surrounding us. That's got to change, and if it doesn't change, in 2 months, 3 months, we'll be right back to where we were.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's this heartbreaking cycle that people of color have always known about, but now it's so constant, and it's difficult to recover and then just go right back into another situation. For me, the experience has been a real journey because it started with me basically breaking down. And ever since, I would say, the death of Jamar Clark and Philando Castile, I had experiences where I couldn't go to the store without, I'm passing every black man that I see in the store, and in my mind I am praying for their safety. Now, if you pass 1/3 of a grocery store and in your mind you are constantly praying for their safety, that is an exhausting trip to the grocery store. And this recent situation with the homicide of George Floyd, it brought me right back there to this non-functional place. And so I spent 3 days trying to become functional again. And I thought to myself, I can't do this every month. I'm losing a week of my life every month just trying to function. And I don't know if people understand, I don't know if our fellow Christians understand just what it takes to claw your way back to that point, and then to come in and say, okay, let's work for systemic change. It's so much on top of the act of getting yourself able to just live through that day again.
You two brought up all the feels I think that a lot of us black women raising black boys feel every single day. The fear and anxiety of what their world will look like when they are grown men, or what their grandkids will look like when they're grown. And when the news goes on and my 10-year-old son watches somebody die for no apparent reason, and just trying to process it myself, but then to find the words to say to them about why it's happening, it's exhausting. Just like you said, it's exhausting, it's saddening, and then to go to work or to a place where everybody around you is white and doesn't reach out and doesn't understand that feeling you have inside and that fear, it just adds another layer on that exhaustion, because you feel like you can't truly express the hurt and the pain and the fear you feel every day, because you might make them uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm just kind of numb, just all the emotions, sad. You go from wanting to, just turn everything off, but then you feel guilty that you're not paying attention, and maybe this incident will bring change, but it's not. I mean, this, for Black people, this has been going on. It's not like we've been saying it's been going on, but now that people are seeing it, maybe, but this is, before cell phones, and we knew this was going on. So it's just kind of a lot of emotions, kind of feeling helpless.
Can I say one more thing? I think that people need to understand, that our fellow brethren, because I'm really happy that a church would have a conversation like this, need to also understand that there's so much hurt that sometimes you get so tired of feeling hurt, because with hurt comes vulnerability, that I think there's a lot of people who are at this choice point where they have to decide, do I stay hurt when it feels like such a defensive mode, or do I go on the offensive? And so there's this choice point between hurt and hate. And you see a lot of people who choose hate. I'm going to hate you before you hurt me. And I've just seen it more so now with the people that I coach, with the people that I talk to in my daily life, that they are really trying to struggle through this choice point. And what I've seen is my people who are Christians have to really dig in and decide, do I believe the Word of God? Do I believe in God's justice? Do I believe in mercy? Do I believe in grace? And really re-up with those things in the face of a society that says that that is foolishness.
Can I piggyback off of what she said? You talk about choices, and what I've been hearing, particularly through my friends and family from back east, it's staying or leaving. Why would you stay in a place that, not that it's good anywhere for us, let's just be honest, but it just seems like it's worse here, because Black people make up 0.5% of the population here. And that fight or flight mentality makes it really hard, and it just seemed to bubble up over this last situation with the murder of George Floyd, to know that when I see a cop car passing by, I freak out. It's like, did I do anything wrong? I have a seatbelt on. I'm looking around, because that's how I'm feeling. And I don't know if my fellow Christians, if my fellow white allies feel that way, but that's where my head is at. And it does transfer over to our children. I saw a young lady riding her bike down 42, and I'm just like, she's by herself, oh my God, don't let any cop see her. And I hate being at this point, but that's where I'm at.
Well, and it reminds me of, we had a conversation on Memorial Day in our family with a young man. He's 11, and his mom just moved near a family friend. And she's building a privacy fence, right? So you think of a privacy fence, you think, oh, okay, well, that's one of many fencing options. But we had an entire conversation with him about, if you go home and nobody's home, because they don't live with a privacy fence, you don't sit on the front step. You do not sit on the front step, and we will walk with you. We'll teach you the route. We will teach you the route from her house, from your house to this house. You will walk with purpose. You will not lollygag. You will get here, and if nobody's here, you will go in through the side gate, and you will stay in the back. So what we're really teaching him is that nowhere is safe
Yes.
for you. So we are going to build an infrastructure where you can bounce from safe house to safe house. That is a horrible thing to have to teach an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
But you do, because not even those who are here to protect and serve feel like a safe point for you.
Could you say some more about growing up black in America? A story or two?
You know, I was working for a nonprofit organization, and as you can imagine, I've been having incessant conversations about what has happened. I retell this story about being 4 years old, and it was the Newark riots. And remember, like it happened yesterday, of my coming home, and I don't think I was coming home from school, but I was just by myself, but things had started bubbling up. And I remember the tanks going down the main drag where I live, South Orange Avenue. And I lived in the projects, and on top of the roof, you can see the SWAT people, because they're all dressed in black camouflage and what have you. And then this one SWAT officer pointed a shotgun at me and used the N-word and told me to get back home before he had to shoot me. This officer lived in my building. I was at his house the day before having dinner at their table. His children and I played together. And I looked up at him and I'm like, but it's me. And he cocked his gun and I'm like, which is why I'm so militant now. Believe it or not, I said, okay, I'm going in. Usually my mouth would get me in trouble and say, look, I live here, but I didn't do that, I was 4. But I was just out playing. I was, you know, what was going on over there was irrelevant to me because this was a safe space. We all hung out together. But when that happened, it put a whole new perspective on me about law and order, about authority, and where I sat in that space, that I had no power, that it didn't matter that he was passing me a plate of something at his house the day before. It just didn't matter.
I can't remember who it was, I don't remember who the poet was. I want to say Nikki Giovanni, but there's this poem about how in the midst of all of the things like that, that you do grow up. That's the craziness about it, right? Time doesn't wait. You grow up, you experience birthdays and babies are born, and so all of the things of life still happen. And then around you, there's this subcontext, and I don't know necessarily, some people have a really strong experience that like tells them, oh, you're not, you are, to use our Christianese, right? You are in this world, but you are not of this world, right? You are here and you are acceptable as long as you're acceptable, but you are not of us. And then I think there's folks like me who just, you learn it in the ether. It kind of hangs in the air. My parents are from the Caribbean. I was born in Minneapolis, and I went to public school. I went to private school at first, and I remember standing at the corner and being called an Oreo and being like, whoa, what's that? Like, I don't understand. So I went, and of course, I asked the 2 black girls in my Catholic school, and one of them said, oh, that means you think you're better than people, but you're just a little N-word like the rest of us. Now, and the craziness is that this is, again, like, this is a very early story, and I never told my dad. Like, I think I was in my 30s before I told him that that had happened. But it's set up in this consciousness like, oh, there's something wrong, and I am doing an act, and I must now do this act, apparently, everywhere I go. And I think over the years, you just begin to learn how to do that. Particularly in Minnesota, I think you just, I don't know, that's how I feel in Minnesota. You just kind of grow up learning how to adjust yourself to the space. The challenge is you get a point at which you look at yourself and you say, wait a second, who am I? I had to figure out who I am, because I have spent so much of my energy, not even realizing it, adjusting myself to be acceptable in the spaces that I'm in. All right, so I'm gonna be black over here, and I'm gonna be acceptable over here, and I'm going to be otherwise over here, and I'm gonna dance in between all of these spaces. And that's kind of been my experience growing up here.
You know, and I wonder if the term Oreo is different by demographics, because I was called an Oreo because I talked white.
Oh no, it's same thing. Same thing. Yeah, you know.
You know, and it's
Yeah,
like,
because it's black on the,
Outside, white on the inside.
You're black on the outside, white on the inside. And
I've heard that phrase.
You know, never
myself.
understood. What do you mean I talk white?
Yeah.
And when my son was asked this, now the majority of my son's friends are white, and they asked him, Lee, why don't you talk like those other kids? He's like, talk like what? He's like, well, you know, you don't kind of walk around with your pants back, sagging and whatnot, and you don't talk like they talk. He looked at them. He's like, you have met my mother, right? She would slap the black off of me if I come in here with my pants hanging down and me talking some bebop language. No, she was an English major, and she taught me, having been in HR, if you don't talk properly, and that's how it's been ingrained in me. My mother was an English English major. You talk like everyone else talks. You don't use slang. Who are you? You need to represent you. You don't need to be part of a group just to belong.
Right. Well, and that goes to how insidious it is, right? That but both the black and white children assume there is a way.
There you go.
To be a race, and that you somehow are abnormal if you do not fit into that, because then I don't have the shortcut by which I can decide whether or not you are of value.
Absolutely.
You should hear, I think it was Lena Waithe said something recently. She said she's going to stop wearing a mask, and she's just going to be herself wherever she's in the boardroom. She's tired of it. She said it's too exhausting.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people describe it like, now we're all forced to wear masks, and then I realized, like, I have been wearing this mask for years.
And especially in business, because having been always the only one and being female, the labels that get attached, if I walk in a certain way, if I'm wearing a certain outfit, if I speak a certain way, like very directly, you're aggressive, you're an angry black woman, you scare us, and you know, you just look like, okay, so let me, like you said, which mask do I put on today to make other folk feel comfortable with me being in the room? I'm done. So done. This is me. Take it or leave it. That's the point where I'm at.
I work in the government, and I'm a woman of leadership, and there's probably, I don't know, 100 people in my position, and I'm the only person who looks like me. And before Governor Dayton left, he required everybody that was in leadership in the state to go to a diversity class. And so I went to a diversity class, and I was in a room, and the instructor was black, and I was black, and nobody else was. And they said some of the most outlandish, ridiculous things about being black and being a civil servant, being in leadership, working for the state, and referred to people as they, like we give them jobs, we let them work here. They should, you know, if they want to belong, they should act like us. And those weren't my colleagues. It was the entire state of Minnesota had to attend this. They weren't in my agency. But my coworker and I who went there afterwards, and she was a white woman, she said, "Are you okay?" That was really hard to hear, I bet. And so that's just part of our story, and it's unfortunate, and it makes people feel uncomfortable, but it makes us feel even worse.
Yeah, I grew up here in the Burnsville area. And I don't know, there's not, I mean, there are examples of things that have happened, but I think it's just a lot of microaggressions. And as a kid, I don't know when it started, but I just had I just realized that being successful in life was going to be much harder, and I never felt like I was, unequal, but that's how I felt. Everyone else looked at me, so I felt like my dad always instilled that too. You're going to have to work, twice as hard, 3 times as hard. So when people, like you see people, successful black people that are in power, and lots of people want to, throw around affirmative action, or that person probably has worked 2-3 times harder to get where they're at. And like I said, I've been in this area for 20 plus years, and honestly, taking a look, like stepping back and looking, I didn't realize how segregated Minnesota is, how just the systematic racism that occurs. And like we were talking earlier about, making safe spaces for, especially our boys of color. And I'm sure almost every black male I know has had the driving talk, how to respond to when you get pulled over by the police. Put your hands on the dashboard so they can see your hands. My wife always wondered why I never carried my wallet in my back pocket, because I don't want to be reaching so that's always where I can just pull it out quick.
There is a particular story that when you sent me these questions, Jeff, and I really thought about it, because my experience is very different, because I grew up in rural Minnesota, so I was the only person who looked like me. So racism was kind of a normal day-to-day thing, and I didn't know any different. And I think the first time I really realized that I was different just because of the color of my skin and my hair, it was picture day, and I had this afro that I picked out perfect, and I adored Whitney Houston, so I always had a little bow in my hair like Whitney Houston would, and I was right up at the front, like it was about to be my turn, and all these kids just kept touching my hair and talking about my hair and making fun of my hair, and they wouldn't stop no matter what I said. So finally I turned around and I pushed them, not to hurt them, just to leave me alone. And I got put to the back of the line, and nobody said what they did was wrong. So that was the first time I really realized what it meant to be black where everybody else is white.
How do you see and experience systemic racism?
Well, professionally speaking, when you look at leadership, and I'm talking about leadership all over the place, not just necessarily in my own organization, they don't look like us. And I know we're going to get on this later, but part of my thinking in terms of change, until we see more people that look like us at the table that makes decisions that can make change, where we have economic equity like our white counterparts, we will always have us and them. And we do have to go on more interviews to get that job. We do have to have the perfect presentation to even be considered. You know it going in. I've worked with recruiters. They tell me, you need to make sure you have this, 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 and this in place, where I know for a fact the person coming up behind me who doesn't look like me just goes in and sails through the interview. And I like interviewing, but when I know I have to put in 10 times the work and I don't get the position, you get frustrated and you get angry. But this is the table in front of us, and if we want to succeed, we got to continue to chip away until we get recognized and we are given that one opportunity, and then hope that you are not in that position for the next 10 years of your life. Because once they elevate you to an area, which I've seen, they don't want you to go anywhere. There you are, that's you, this is where we can manage you, and you stay right there. And it's frustrating because I know I'm just as qualified, if not more, and yet I don't get the same access as other people do.
Right. I don't know how much you want me to go into this. I have so many thoughts on this. Woo. I'll say from my own personal experience, a couple of stories that I think will piggyback on yours. I took a job in a county, and the first entry that I got there was, and I was very happy for it because I was out of college and the recession was a-coming, and it was a front desk receptionist. Now I'm in grad school, and I am working my tail off, going to school, coming to this job. I have years of experience. Like my first job ever in life was with the Minneapolis Public Schools. And so I've been in paraprofessional, semi-professional positions before going to college, and now I've come out of college and I'm just trying to keep working, but this is the job I got. And so a job came up for a professional position in human resources, and I decided, okay, I'm gonna go for it. And I got it, and I kid you not, I'm sitting at the front desk, and everybody that came by said, I hear you're gonna be an assistant in HR. And I was like, no, I'm going to run XYZ program. Oh, you're gonna help so-and-so run XYZ program? I was like, no. But what I realized was I'd sat at that desk for a year and nobody had gotten to know me. They didn't have a clue as to who I was, what I did, what I was capable of. I was just the gal at the front desk. Meanwhile, no fault of her own, my Caucasian counterpart had gotten an opportunity to go to the back and had basically been promised that she'd never have to come back to the front desk. And I was told, aren't you excited to be lead receptionist?
Oh my.
So I was like, no. But the perpetuation of that, I think people don't recognize the limits of their expectations on people of color. And then they don't recognize the ways in which we have these very insidious assumptions that creep in to our decision making within an organization. So when we think about systemic racism, that job that I got in HR eventually led to my work in diversity and inclusion. My challenge has always been that we would come together and we have these meetings, and we're talking about policy, and we're trying to find what program can we bring in, and what what model and what books
can we bring,
right, et cetera. And I'm sitting here and I'm talking with a fervency and an urgency, and I'm finally looking around realizing you don't understand any of this urgency, because when we leave here, you're not gonna touch this again for the next 2 months. But when I leave here, I have to raise my brown babies through your broken systems, and we are not connecting. And I don't know how to get you to understand the urgency of this. Like I said, I worked for the Minneapolis Public Schools, and for years, like, everybody is upset about Common Core. I'm like, Common Core. And it was like, well, how can you be so loosey-goosey about Common Core? It's ridiculous. Well, because for 20 years, I watched y'all say that you couldn't come together on a curriculum. Here's my question. How many children matriculated through your schools in those 20 years? How many lives got affected by the fact that we couldn't try something, do something? It's not going to be perfect. If we keep looking for the perfect thing, the thing that nobody in the media will get on us about, the thing that nobody's going to write to the commissioner about, the thing that nobody's going to have an issue about, we will never try anything. We will never do anything. I will take 100 attempts that need to be reworked any day over constantly talking and talking and talking for years, because you go home and you sit in your easy chair and your life stays relatively normal, and I go back to my community and I am watching the effects of inaction.
How do you see and experience systemic racism? Okay.
So the question you asked is such a hard question, because there's so many facets of everyday life that racism can affect somebody who's not white, especially in an area like Minnesota where almost everyone's white. So it's the police officers, it's the workplace, it's the government, it's, you know, your neighbors, it's church, it's everywhere that you go, you can see it. And then there's those who consider themselves a non-racist. And I've recently shared and read this quote that it's time for America to open their eyes and stop just being a non-racist, but be an anti-racist and actively speaking out against those who are racist. And, you know, it can make people feel so uncomfortable. It can, you know, to admit that you maybe contributed with a microaggression towards somebody who was black, or that you said something in a group forum that made a black person uncomfortable, or that you just simply ignored the issue. It can be an uncomfortable feeling. And I have family that are police officers. I have friends that are police officers, and I respect and honor the work they do. And not all cops are bad cops, and I honestly believe that. But like I said before, the good cops need to stop just being a non-racist, but being anti-racist for there really to be a change. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if in a month, once things are a little back to normal, everybody goes back to normal and just says, well, that was done with, we're gonna forget about it and, you know, not worry about it, then nothing's gonna change. Because we see this time and time again, a black man losing their life just because they're black. And it's gonna take more than just black voices to make a change.
Yeah, I see systemic racism and you know, the disproportionate number of black and brown people incarcerated. Just the lack of, you know, generational wealth. You know, and the banking practices, home ownership. I mean, the list can go on. I like what someone mentioned earlier. It's, you know, it's time for action. Things might not, you know, the action might not be perfect, but it's better than sitting there talking about, you know, what's wrong. We know what's wrong.
So Martell, we'll start with you and go around the other way. What would you say to someone who, like me, once said, I'm not a racist?
Like we were just talking about, that's not enough. We need allies. It's not just a black problem. It's a United States problem. It's a humanity problem. But we need allies. If you know, if our white allies, if they want, you know, their community to be better and more cohesive, they need to step up when they see things happening. They need to be aware of what, you know, what our leaders are doing and hold them accountable. So like, yeah, it's not enough just to not be racist.
Can you repeat the question?
What would you say to someone who says, I'm not a racist?
I think that a lot of people think, oh, that happens in Minneapolis or that happens in Atlanta, not in my backyard. And I think that people really need to realize that it does happen in Savage, it does happen in Burnsville. I can tell you this last school year, a classmate of my boys had racial slurs painted on their driveway. Martell's family in Savage has had racial slurs put on their shed. I know of people who have been approached by police simply because they're black and they live in the South Metro. So it does happen here. People need to realize just because you're not a racist, you really still need to find how to find your voice to be an ally, to stick up for those who you see injustices, to help educate and make an educational system for everyone, not just those that are white have those advantages, and for those who are black, they shouldn't have to work 10 times harder just to get a college education. It's a broken system, and unless everybody opens their eyes and not just be a non-racist, things will never get better.
I answered it two ways when I saw the question in the list. The first part of me, I snapped back into myself, and I was just like, and?
Right. Great job. Great job.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
So you're a non-racist.
all right.
Yep. Good for you.
And then I stepped back and I thought about it more. And what I think that people use that as a cop-out. I'm not a racist. It's supposed to be the end of a conversation, but I'm a coach. So it's the beginning of one, because the first thing I want to ask you then is, okay, that's all right. So what are you? Tell me what are you? What do you consider your identity? Who do you consider yourself to be? And from that, then how do you use that in the world to help there not be injustice in the world, right? So if you say, well, I'm a Christian. Okay, let's start there. So how as a Christian do you see this injustice? And how as a Christian do you want to help make this injustice, right this injustice? How do you as a Christian engage with other people? How do you engage with this? So it's okay. I don't need you not to be a racist. I need you to engage being whoever you are. Not being a racist doesn't get you out of engagement. Because there is more to be done. And I recognize that it's uncomfortable. I feel like we've asked people in the world to kind of all squint our eyes and like cock our heads 30% to the right and then just kind of like see the mirage of America. But the reality is waiting if we open our eyes just a little bit wider. I need you to open your eyes wider, and I know that it's gonna be uncomfortable. But I'd rather we walk towards something in discomfort than just stay in this mirage when we're really in the desert and we all perish together, right? I think that's the biggest thing about this whole situation with the riots and things going on in Minneapolis, is it really helped people realize, oh, wait, if it all burns, we all burn together? Nobody gets free from this? Well, the reality is it's not just now. Nobody's been free of this. Racism in America has touched and has messed with all of us. And we have to recognize that so that we can work together to make it different, if not better.
When I looked at the question, I sat down and I looked up the definition of racism. What is racism? And racism is about going against or feeling, and I'm paraphrasing, but feeling a certain kind of way about someone that looks different from you. And so when I hear terms like, well, I'm not racist, if you're in the majority, you can't help it, because we here, Black and brown people, we're not in the majority. So of course you're gonna look at us differently. It's what you do with it. And everyone said it, and you're absolutely right. It's not enough to say, I'm not racist. It's about, what do you do with that privilege? Because let's own it, you all have privilege. When you walk into a store, being white, you don't get followed. Mm-hmm. I walk into a store and I could be dressed coming from work or dressed rolling out of bed. I will get followed. To this day, I get followed. I get followed here in Apple Valley. I was standing at a cashier and I asked my son to, go get me this bottle of wine. And the guy at the register, and then I walked up to the register, this guy in the register said, there's a black guy in here with a hoodie, and he's going over there and he's picking up a bottle of wine. Go watch him. I'm standing right there. And I let it go that I was this child's mama. And I looked at him and I said, excuse me, he belongs to me. And he looked at me and I said, as a matter of fact, you see all this stuff here? Keep it. And here comes my son, oblivious to what just happened. He's like, where are we going? I'm like, just put it down. We're leaving. He's like, but we have to pay for this. We're not buying it. We're going somewhere else. He's like, all right. People judge based on what they see. That's racist. When I walk out the door, because I have brown skin, you're going to look at me differently because you don't know me. You don't know anything about my background, where I'm from, what I've done. You can't even get to those questions because the first thing you see is this. Do I want to say that's normal? I think it is, because when I see white people, I see white people. Not like I see dead people, but I see white people. But I like to think that I take the time to get to know you. And maybe it's because of my profession that I'm in the people business, but it does start with engagement. And when I think of the turmoil that has taken place this past week and the amount of calls and conference calls that I've been on, I had to say today, I'm tired of making white people feel good about themselves. I am tired of teaching them how to treat me. I want to say, we're human. Cut me open. I bleed the same way that you do, but it's gone beyond that. And it's gone beyond that because no matter where I am, you will always see me differently. How you respond, that's on you.
Yeah.
Martell, how does your faith call you, inform you in the face of racism?
To be honest, it kind of questions your faith, because you see, I mean, why would God let certain people be treated a certain way over years and years? So yeah, it does question it does question your faith sometimes, I think, but I don't know what else to really add, but it kind of falters some.
I think one of the most difficult things about faith and then looking at race and injustice, there's a lot of people who have ulterior motives who use Christianity against us. And so I really love the phrase, when they go low, we go high and rise above it. But it also makes you really angry that the thing that you hold dear and with your Christianity, with your faith, that it can be twisted and those words can be used against you to try to make you feel like you're less than because you're black. But on the other side, I also teach my boys, when they see suffering, when they see people hurting, you help them, whether it's financially or physically, and you also pray for them, and you pray for peace, and you pray for the injustices you see, because if you don't do those three things, nothing's going to change.
It's a hard road, I think, I use the phrase, claw your way back to your faith. When it seems like you are called to love people with a love that will not be reciprocated. So I personally feel very intimately connected right now with that concept of the love of Christ. To do good to those that despitefully use you hurts. And so, like, if I leaned on something other than my faith and belief, true belief in my Christian faith, not in our rituals as Christians, not in our platitudes. This is beyond Instagram faith, right? This is like it took 36 hours for me to pray. And then that prayer didn't look pretty. And that prayer had a lot of tissues associated with it. And I probably pulled something out of the book of Lamentations, or the Hebrews, dear Lord, how long, right? I have found that it's not that I went there, it's that when I did go there, when I could get myself at least back to my Bible, that I could anchor in something, even though things are not well, that I could have an anchor. I worked for Ramsey County when the trial of the murder of Philando Castile was happening, and had that experience of working with county attorneys who thought that they had this case. And the fallout for me from that was there's a park a block and a half from my home. And I said, I'm gonna take the baby boy and the daughter to the park. And I encountered 4 white people along the way. These are just people going about their daily business, taking a walk, walking their dog. And I nearly ran my stroller, which was a huge stroller, into the grass, like trying to avoid. There was like this visceral fear that I could not control. And we never made it the block and a half to the park. I turned around and went home. And I looked at my husband and I said, I only know one thing. I know that we need to go to church on Sunday. He'd been drumming for a purposefully generative, trying to be like, multicultural church. And we were going there as our church that we went to. He also was a drummer for a black church, and they didn't call him for that week. But we looked at ourselves and we're like, do we go there? And he said, I'm going to leave this up to you because you're having a really hard time with this. I will go wherever we go. And I drove us over to our regular church that week, and I cried the whole service. I couldn't get up, I couldn't raise my hands, I ugly cried, sobbed the whole service, and there were very well-loving white people who had loved my children before all of that happened and loved them still, and they put their hands on my shoulders and they let me cry. And they didn't know what to say, but they did that. But for me, that was a choice. The black church is a beautiful church, wonderful people, but it was going to be me running to a place of safety. And for me, I have to find that anchor in my God. That's where that has to exist. But I feel like I need my fellow Christians to understand that when this happens and that person has gone through that, they are choosing to come to church. They are choosing to reach their hand out to you, and they are choosing to love you with something that they got from the throne of grace, not that they pulled out of themselves. And that is a hard experience. I'm grateful to have it, but it is so challenging. That's what I come to it with, and that's how it anchors me. And I kind of, going back to, I know that old hymn, It Is Well With My Soul, right? When he wrote that, he was still in grief, the author of that hymn, but he knew where his anchor was.
Wow, you all have been so eloquent and talking about faith. I struggle. And I've been struggling a lot. And I go back to knowing that faith is believing in what you don't see.
Yeah.
And so I try to use it as a foundation, because what I'm not seeing right now is equity. What I'm not seeing right now is trust. What I'm not seeing right now is a belief in our leaders, who not only believe that change has to happen, but they're engaged in that process. My faith gets me up every morning. My faith helps me to get through my day. My faith helps me pray every morning, every afternoon, and every night for the safety of those that I love. But I'll be honest, I'm angry. I'm angry with God that he sees his children in all of this upheaval. And I want him to come down with a thunderbolt and just take them out. I'm angry because of this political climate. To be a Christian today is looked at negatively.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be a Christian. But is that what I lead with? No. Because of how it's defined now. And I look to God to help me understand why. This is not what this is supposed to be about, but here's what we've got. It's hard for me to know where to start, let alone tell others where to start. It's hard for me to live it every single day and look at people who are crying about the circumstances. And it's not that I don't believe the tears, I do. I really do. But they're not living in my skin. And I've grown weary of trying to get them to understand. And I can take the political platform of we need to have all of us at the table. We need to have equity in decision making. We need to have finances that are equally distributed. But at the end of the day, that's my dream. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I don't believe it's going to happen in my lifetime. I pray that it happens in my grandchildren's children's time. We've got a lot of work to do to unpack the institutional racism that is who we are. And when we think about how this country started, it started because of riots. It started on the back of slaves who were brought here, taken here against their will. So while there are some that want us to forget that history, that's who we are. And we just see it manifest itself in different ways every decade, every generation. But at the core of it, it's keeping us in a place where they want to control us. Took me 60 years to get to that point. And it angers me that I'm there, but I can't ignore what I see anymore.
I think people think it was so far removed from when it was so long ago, you know, the racism in the South and the marches and everything else. But Martell's dad was in a segregated school in Atlanta, and he's, how old's your dad? 62?
Like 64.
So, you know, it's very present in people's lives, and people can't just move on. And it happened to people who are still living, and it's still happening every day. And so that's the hard part for people to really be uncomfortable in their own skin and in their own whiteness, to really open up their eyes, really listen to what people have to say, that it's still happening, and the things that happened in the past weren't all that long ago.
Yeah, and the policies and things that are in place now are, they're not equitable. And
I think there was something important too in what you said, in that I can see somebody watching this and saying, well, God, like, how do I even begin? Like, I can't be in your skin. So how do I even try to do anything? And I had to explain to a friend, I said, here's the deal. Not everybody is in a place, because of the journey that they've had to walk and the life they've lived. Not everybody's in a place where they can hear you right now. So I'm going to say it this way because I can't figure out a better way to say it. You might reach out and that person doesn't reach back, right? You as a Caucasian person might say, I'm going to reach out, and you take this big step and you're in your discomfort and this feels huge to you. It doesn't feel quite as huge to the person you're going to, but it feels huge to you. And then that person says, I'm sorry, I can't reach back. And you get all in your feelings about it, because you think, oh, they don't like me. Oh, I'm gonna challenge you right now. Stop that narrative. If you didn't ask if the person doesn't like you, then you don't know. They might be going through so much more. They just don't have capacity to reach back out and be generative to you at this time. They might never. You might have to reach out to more than one Black person. That type of thing. You might have to reach out, you might have to reach sideways to your friend who maybe has more information about this. I say that because, like we said, this conflagration, right? This whoosh of emotion will die down, and CNN will go away, right? And helicopters won't fly over the first-tier suburbs. And when that doesn't happen, what needs to then happen is when emotions are high, you can ride on emotion, but this needs more than emotion. This needs courage. Courage will come before confidence, right? You have to take courageous steps before you get any type of confidence in what you're doing. But can you reach out, and then can you reach out again, and then can you reach out again? And the reason why your Black brothers and sisters are asking you to do this is because that's the life they live. Every morning I get up, I have no choice. I have to reach out, and then I have to reach out again. Like we've even said it here, this doesn't happen with just Black voices, right? So we have to keep reaching out and reach out again and reach out again. If you gotta talk to a friend, whatever, to get through your feelings, I get it, but don't stay in your feelings, especially if somebody just says, I can't with you right now. It just means I can't with you right now. It doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean I think you're a racist. It doesn't mean I hate you. It's just that we're all on this journey. And yes, for those people who re-up every day as allies, I will say this, I am thankful for you, because I can't do this right now. And you don't have to, and you choose to. And that means a lot to me.
Yeah, no, I touching on that, people ask what they can do. It's kind of like right now, people are going through trauma, grief. It's kind of like you lose, when someone loses a loved one, they're like, what do I say? Sometimes just being there, and not having the perfect words for it. But yeah, realizing that you might feel rejected and uncomfortable, but we feel uncomfortable all the time.
Yeah, it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And as a human being, to have the compassion to care about someone else is what makes us God's children. I just believe that. And you're right, we have always had to brush it off, get back out there. I have a lot of white friends who I love dearly, and they have texted, they have called, and many of them know not to always anticipate that I have a response for them. But the fact that they called, the fact that they reached out, means more to me than I can put into words. And so being okay with being uncomfortable is what we're asking our white allies to do. And don't stop. Don't stop with that first, I don't want to be bothered. Don't jump to conclusions, because our journeys, while it may have all gotten us here, have been so different. And to recognize that we are all hurting. As a community, we are all hurting. And how we articulate that to our neighbors, to our friends, to our families, is going to be different based on our experiences. So I'm not looking to put a bow on things, because I would love to say we've got the answer here. We don't. What I am willing to say is, I want to thank you for caring enough to ask, but know that this journey in front of us is long and it's hard, and we're asking you not to give up, because we're asking of ourselves not to give up, even when we've had examples of why we should.
And yet, despite all of that, here you are. And so we receive this as a gift of grace. Truly grateful for your presence. And I pray that God will use what you brought to open eyes.